신종 코로나 바이러스 감염증 증상은 기침과 호흡곤란, 발열, 그리고 심한 근육통입니다. 신종 코로나 바이러스는 침방울과 신체 접촉으로 감염된다고 알려져 있습니다. 기내엔 공기 순환 시스템이 작동하고 공기가 위에서 아래로 흘러 밖으로 나가기 때문에 감염 확률은 낮습니다.
Did I get you all scared and worked up? Really, I know the news is trying to be very fanatical when it comes to what is happening with this coronavirus. But really, here I am, an American. I've been living in South Korea for about 8 years, and I just wanted to give you my perspective because in the last couple of days, I've come to some realizations that have made me like, I need to make a video about this because it's quite interesting. The difference between being an American in Korea and seeing the response to this coronavirus versus my family and my friends and the typical kind of American sentiment back home. And I think it's a great learning experience for me, and I thought I would just share it with you, how there can be a difference in the way that two cultures, at least the two cultures that I can experience, are dealing with the same situation. And quite frankly, I'm surprised and shocked. And third, I'm quite embarrassed. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, let me say first off, the whole point of this is to try to meet a middle ground, a balance between the two extremes. And the two extremes are being crazy, out of control, scared and worried, and not being able to breathe and having panic attacks because you're so worried about catching the coronavirus. But then the other extreme of saying it's really not a big deal, only, certain people have to worry about it, and even if I get it, it's not a big deal. So I'm just going to live my life exactly the way I was living my life before. So those are the two extremes. The goal of this is to try to get to the middle ground. Okay? So what I find very interesting is Korea was the second kind of big hotspot for the coronavirus after it erupted in China. It erupted here in Korea, specifically in Daegu. I'm actually in Seoul, which is about 3 hours north of Daegu. And Daegu is the third largest city in Korea. And it just kind of encapsulates everything that I thought, couldn't believe about what I'm going to say later, is captured in this idea of what happened in Daegu. So what happened in Daegu, we had like 22, 23 cases, just kind of like, not that many cases here in Korea. But then all of a sudden, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, about a month ago, it just kind of exploded. And the reason it exploded is because of the mentality that it's not that big a deal, or that we don't really have to worry about other people. So in this small kind of particular circumstance, we had what's being called like a cult church in here in Korea. So there's lots of Christian churches here, and there are several cult kind of branches. And they come up to you in the subways, outside the subways where you're walking in. They will talk to you, try to get you to do some sort of language exchange, and then they kind of get you recruited into the system. It's kind of what they're hoping to do. They have been known, there's lots of articles that shows that they will go to like lying lengths to get you convinced that they're just okay until they spurn on you and try to get you involved in the actual church. So this cult church basically it's been all over the news, and a lot of Koreans are basically flaming them and getting really mad, and to a degree I think they should, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But basically, this woman who they call super spreader, I think she was case number 19, or maybe it was 29, 19 or 29, I know it was a 9.
And that brings us to this BBC News article talking about the South Korean sect that was identified recently as a hotbed. About 30 of the 53 cases identified today in South Korea came from the city of Daegu and was tied to one 61-year-old woman who tested positive for the virus earlier in the week.
And she was starting to feel sick, and she had a fever. She had some of the symptoms of coronavirus. She was at the hospital, and they asked her to take the test, and she denied the test and said she denied it because she had not been in China or had not been in contact with anybody from China. Like, she would know that. And basically leaves the hospital. She gets into a car accident 2 days later and has to come back to the hospital where she's still feeling sick. They asked to take the coronavirus check again, or the test a second time, which she denies, and then the next morning sneaks out of the church, or out of the hospital, to go to church. I don't know if she snuck out or if she just left. And she went to church, and the church had like 1,000 people in attendance. The church has this particular cult church is all over Korea. They have many different branches, and they have like 100,000 to 200,000 members that go to these churches. So she went to this church, and I guess there was somewhere around 1,000 people in the service that morning, and she just infected everybody. And then what was crazy about it is that the church tried to supposedly hide it, and they were trying to, be secretive about it. And I'm sure part of it was like, we're going to get screwed because everyone's going to hate us for doing this. But a part of it, I think they were already a secretive kind of church anyway. And so the government was trying to find out and see where the connections were so they could test everybody so it wouldn't spread. But they were hiding. There were even stories of a man that was belonging to that church, that was at that church service, that basically was told to self-quarantine, and because he was at the church service, and he didn't listen and just kept going out and doing whatever he wanted to do like normal. And he even moved. So he had movers come to his apartment, and he moved apartments to a different apartment, infecting all those people. So this is what caused the huge outbreak in Daegu as another hotspot. So basically like 60 to 70% of all the cases are in Daegu. There's only 130 in Seoul, which I'm shocked at, and it's been a month. I'm guessing that it's going to get a lot bigger because Seoul is, in the top 10 cities in the world of people, and it's very compact and very close. So what this has done for me is I'm not going crazy and being like, oh my God, I'm going to get it, although I think I'm going to get it. But however, I do think there are precautions that you should take, or that I should take, because of this situation. Number one is you definitely should be proactive about trying to avoid situations where it may be more risky and easy to get the virus. And what's interesting, and I'll make this point in a second, is it's not so much about me. And this is the problem with what's going on in the United States, my home country. So the idea is, if I get it, I'm typically in an age bracket. I'm not going to say my age, but I'm in the age bracket that's like 0.4% of people are dying from it. So 80%, we've all heard, are having mild case symptoms, basic flu with maybe a little bit more than the flu. But my age group, I'm probably going to be fine. But that's not the point. The point is we're trying to stop it from spreading. And if I go out and get it, even if I'm fine and I have it for a week or two, I'm going to give it to somebody else, and they're going to give it to somebody else, they're going to give it to somebody else. So, number one, which has been killing me, I have been avoiding and not going to the gym for 2 weeks now. And the reason why is two reasons. Number one, obviously a gym is like a petri dish where you're going to be on exercise machines where other people have been. But particularly in Korea, it's incredibly, it's just terrible. Because in Korea, they have no disinfectant like stations where you can like get a bottle of disinfectant with a paper towel after you've worked out on a machine, spray that towel, and then wipe off the machine. At least you could kill some of your germs. As a matter of fact, I've been at this gym for 8 years, and I'm gonna call it out right now because I have gone to them on 3 different occasions in those. I've been there 6 years. Sorry, I've been in Korea 8 years, but I've been at this gym for 6 years. I've gone to them on 3 separate occasions, usually 6 months in between, 7 months a year, something like that. and asked them, showed them pictures of the United States. Okay, here's a gym in the United States. Look at this. This is just a little paper towel dispenser. This is a bottle, a spray bottle that you can put disinfectant solution in. And then after, you can spray it, put it down so that you get all the germs off of it after you sweat on it. All 3 times the supervisor or manager turned me down, even when I said I will pay for it. And I'm not even asking for lots of stations. I was saying just one station. Just have one little station where people can go over and wipe off and clean themselves. And he said no, all 3 times. So I think this is pretty normal in Korea. I've never been to it. I've been to several gyms, and I've never been to a gym where they have disinfectant spray and they have this kind of sanitation system. And so you have all these people, and I know they never clean the equipment. They never clean the equipment. So you're just talking about having so many germs being passed in the gym. So I've avoided the gym even though I don't want to, because working out for me is one of the most important things. It's a daily thing for me. So to not go to the gym for 2 weeks has been tough. That's number 1. Number 2, our university. I work at a university. I'm a university professor teaching English, and our university was supposed to begin the new semester on March 2nd, which was last week. And because of this coronavirus outbreak, they postponed the semester for 2 weeks, and we are going to meet first on the 16th of March, which is next Monday, is the beginning of the semester. So we are postponed for 2 weeks, which a lot of universities, pretty much all the universities in Korea are doing. But I got an email last week from the university that said, okay, we are starting on March 16th still. However, because of the coronavirus outbreak, we are going to have online classes for the first 2 weeks. So from March 16th to March 27th will be online classes. Now this is incredibly inconvenient for me especially. So I have no problem with online classes. Online classes, you can learn things from online classes. Most of the Korean that I've learned through my self-study, online videos, that kind of stuff, but it's come to reading and writing. So I've said this before to all my friends. I teach a speaking class, a speaking English class, where the whole point is the Korean students are supposed to practice their English, because the only way you can get better at speaking English is by actually having to speak it to other people. So for me, as an example, my Korean reading and writing are pretty good, but my listening and my speaking are just kind of so-so, and definitely not as high as my reading and writing, because I don't get to practice as much in Korea, or I haven't practiced as much in Korea with my speaking and listening, partly because Koreans are pretty good at English overall, and they want to practice their English a lot, so even when I speak Korean to them, they start speaking to me in English, even when I ask them not to. So that makes it hard. So if I don't practice my Korean speaking, it's definitely not going to get better. It's the same thing with English. So how are we going to do online classes for a speaking listening class? Now we can do listening things where I can have them listen to something and write it down. But to practice speaking is going to be next to impossible unless we have some sort of online classroom, like there's like things like Zoom and other things like that, which I've been checking out. But they're not very good, because even with Korea having the fastest internet in the world, I have practiced this and tried it out, and there's just too much lag, especially when you have like 35 students all trying to join this thing. There's too much internet problems, even in the fastest internet country in the world. So it's going to be really difficult. However, I think the university has made a wise decision in postponing it for 2 more weeks. And I'm guessing they're going to postpone it even more than that, but we'll have to find that out. So why is this important? Korea has been on top of it. If you look at the statistics right here, if you go all the way to the right side, it's basically how many tests they've done per million people. And if you can see it right here, look. Right, Korea is well and above everybody else. So Korea has been really, really good about testing here, which is, I think, very proactive about trying to figure out how to contain the situation. Okay? They've also have like drive-through testing. So if you don't want to, take everybody in the waiting room and get them sick. I could take my car, or in my case, I have a scooter auto bike, and I can like roll up and they can have me, take the test right there without having to infect other people in the waiting room. Great. That's number one. Number two, on my phone, anywhere in Seoul, but specifically my area as well, if someone is confirmed case, they basically send a message to my phone telling me what area and how many cases there are in that area at the moment. And then of course there's some Korean sites, websites that you can go to, which I can point to right here. And when you go to those sites, you can see, if you go to the second tab, it tells in Korean where exactly these people for the last 4 or 5 days went. So they're at home, and then they went to some convenience store, and then they went to the university, and they went to a coffee shop. So you can see, hey, I happened to be there that same day. I might have crossed paths with them. Now I can self-quarantine, or at least report that I am possibly infected. This is all proactive kind of situations that Korea is providing. Now, the reason I'm making this video is because as an American, I have, in the last week or so, become quite embarrassed with how the American government, and I wouldn't say it's just the government. So we're not here to blame Trump, and I'm not a Trump person. I don't like him or dislike him. I don't care about him. But a lot of people are going to use this to blame Trump, which I'm not doing that. What I'm saying is my family, my friends, and just the general sentiment I see on the news with people in America is completely the opposite. It's like, oh, it's not a big deal, I'm just, only 80% of the people were infected. And it was just very interesting to me because it was such a different perspective from what I'm seeing happening in Korea, where the people, not the government only, the people are also taking it very seriously. And people are, as you could see in the beginning of this video, the streets are kind of dead. There's not a ton of people walking around as much as there normally is, for sure. It's only people who have to go to work, that kind of thing. And of course, some people who else want to go out. So the United States, my family and friends are just like, what, are we supposed to worry about it? What are we supposed to, we had SARS before, we had MERS before, and those all went away. But the difference is, this in the first month has already way surpassed both of those. And it's obvious. Look at Korea. It's exploding. Look at Italy. It's exploding. Look at Iran. It's exploding. And still, America was not having any testing done. And it's still, like, they're 3 weeks behind. And they're still barely testing. You have all these doctors online and on articles and on the news saying, we do not have tests. We have to go through these policies to get tests. And of course, I think in the last couple of days, they finally sent out 100,000 tests or whatever. Here's the point. The point is this. Correct. Most people who get this disease or virus are probably not going to be that affected. But the problem is, if you are infected and 60 to 70% of people are infected, you're going to make that 5% of people who do get affected and die from this exponentially grow. So if we had 20,000 cases in the world and only 5% of that died, that's good, that's low. But if you have 70%, which is what a lot of epidemiologists are saying, 60 to 70% of the world's population that is infected or possibly going to be infected, which they are seeing this is quite a good possibility, then that 5% is going to be somewhere around 50 million people die from this virus. That's why it's a big deal. And that's why it should just not be thrown off and, oh, I just don't really think it's that big of a deal. Don't be reactive, be proactive. And so it's just very interesting. And so my assumption is, because of the way I see the United States people in general just kind of handling the situation, I think it's going to blow up in the United States. Actually, I think they're 3 weeks behind. So I think the numbers are already possibly bigger than Korea, which is, I think, just been overtaken by Italy. But I think the United States is going to be, because they were so lazy about being proactive to try to contain this thing, I think a lot of people are going to die. So if this happens, I'm actually moving back to the United States this summer. I don't know how this is going to affect me, especially if I'm coming from Korea and they stop people from coming back to the United States from Korea. But maybe by then, the United States is going to be way worse than Korea. So I don't know what to tell you. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes, actually it was about 20 minutes, to talk about my perspective as someone who's living in Korea. And what's interesting is I keep seeing a lot of people ripping on Korea for some reason about wasn't doing a good job. But Korea has been doing an amazing job, to my surprise. When it broke out in China and then it started coming to Korea, I thought we were going to be screwed, because Korea tends to be, and I would say even Eastern culture, Asian culture, tends to be very procrastinating or reacting to most things. For instance, in education, they'll just throw me into a class and say, go. There's like no pre-planning. They don't do pre-planning at all. It's not a planning culture. Whereas the United States is more of a planning culture. So I was expecting the United States to be very proactive and planning, whereas I thought, oh, Korea is going to just like react. And they kind of did. China kind of did that as well. But they have been very proactive since and been on top of it, to my surprise, where I feel like the United States is just kind of lackadaisical. Oh, we'll just, it's not that big a deal. And I just think that this is something that kind of was very eye-opening to me, living in a different culture and seeing my culture and how there was a difference of reaction. And I was quite surprised, and I'm quite embarrassed. So for all you American people listening to this right now, if you are still listening, you gotta be proactive. Now, I'm not saying stay in your house, lock yourselves, don't ever go outside, but the whole just washing your hands, be thoughtful, not for yourself, but be thoughtful about going out and going to big groups of people, or even socializing in group places, because if you're okay, that's fine. But by you getting infected because you're not being proactive about where you go and what you do, you could get somebody else infected, which gets somebody else infected, which gets somebody else infected, and then that 5% number keeps exponentially growing, and tons of people are going to die from this. So don't be freaking out, but at the same time, don't think it's not that big a deal, because it's definitely a bigger deal. This is very reminiscent of the 1919 outbreak flu that killed 50 million people, and it came in 3 different waves. So this is just the first wave. There's quite possibly going to be a second and third wave of this in China and in other places. So I think we need to be a little bit more vigilant everywhere you go, but not scared. All right, so I've talked way too long, but I thought I just wanted to get this out. Just for the record, even if nobody listens to this or ever watches this, I wanted to get it out for me to remind me in the future of what I was going through, and what will happen in the future will be interesting to look back on this video then. So, as always, this is Captain Morgan. Like and subscribe if you like this, and check back for more things. Peace.